So if everyone who is not speaking could mute themselves, just in preparation for us to start. Okay, so shall we start, Tim? Okay.
I have a final question before we start.
Yeah.
So will you give us the remote control when it's time to present? That's how it works?
No, you asked Tim to go to the next slide, so you can just say next, and he's going to switch.
We'll sort that out. Let's go, Leandro.
Yeah, keep the first screen, please, Tim. First screen? Yes. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the 6th Rose Festival on Recognizing and Rewarding Open Science in Software Engineering. I'm Leandro Minco, and together with Tim Menzies, we are the Artifact co-chairs for ICSE 2020. Next. This session is basically a combination of the ICSE 2020 Artifacts track and the Rose Festival. In the Artifacts track, we got 66 artifact submissions from accepted ICSE 2020 papers and also papers that had been accepted elsewhere. 4 of these were rejected, and this is thanks to our review process where the reviewers and the authors of the artifacts interact with each other so that these artifacts can be improved until they are ready for acceptance. So the idea behind this is really to encourage open science. The Rose Festival is a series of lightning talks where people present and discuss their artifacts, plus a panel to discuss open science in software engineering. Next. So I'm going to, yes, okay, all right. So artifacts are basically digital objects that are created by authors as part of their study or generated by the experiment itself. So there is a wide range of digital objects that can be considered artifacts. This could be software systems, it could be scripts to run experiments, it could be data sets used in the experiments, or even output data generated by the experiments. And previously, artifact tracks of software engineering conference have been focusing on reusable and available artifacts. But now there's been a push towards also encouraging replicated and reproduced artifacts. Next. And the interesting thing about encouraging artifacts through badges is that we can really encourage open science. In this plot here, we can see an example of the percentage of articles reporting available data, both before and after this journal shown in black started to adopt badges. So this journal is a journal from psychology. And you can see here that after this red dashed line there, where the badges were introduced, the percentage of articles reporting open data really increased compared to the other journals that didn't adopt badges. So this badge system is really a nice way to encourage open science. Next. In ICSE, we have been encouraging open science not only through the badges that are given to the papers that have artifacts, but also by awarding ACM SIGSOFT Distinguished Artifact Awards to the best artifacts. And in particular, in this year's ICSE, we had 5 out of 62 artifacts receiving this award. In particular, Zamani and Hemati replicated the study of Arcuri and Fraser's IMSI 2018 paper and received this award. The other award was given to Ayer et al.'s reproduction of Tsei et al.'s ICSE 2014 paper. Next. And there were 3 reusable and available artifacts that have also received this award. So these were the artifacts produced by Spadini et al., Umbatova et al., and Johnson et al. For their ICSE 2020 papers. Yeah. So now Tim is going to talk a little bit more about the Rose Festival.
And Leandro, I've got the slides all on my screen. If you could watch the Slack channel and see if there are any issues arising with people.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. So the Rose Festival is a salute to replication, reproduction, and open science and software engineering. It's just one of these ideas that as soon as we started suggesting it, everyone wanted to do it. FSE 18, ICSE 19, FSE 19, ESIM 19, RE 19, ICSE 20, ICSME 20, and ASE 20 would have had an artifacts track if the COVID stuff hadn't messed with timetables. And there's going to be another artifacts track at FSE 20. So this is something people are very excited about. Now, what we do here in the artifacts track is we're talking about replication reproduction studies. And this is to say, not just products of the current conference, but products from any software engineering venue. So whereas most artifact tracks will just look at the products from this conference, we'll take anything, Rose takes anything from anywhere, because we want to reach back in time and reward prior work that's been reproduced or replicated. The Rose event is a bunch of lightning talks that you're about to see. There's a panel on best practices and anti-patterns. The Rose Festival showcased results from any venue, not just from ICSE, but from elsewhere. And you've seen we gave awards this year to people that reproduced MZ papers and papers from elsewhere. It's not an archive event yet, but we have special issues planned. Very excited about those. And then every Rose meant to write a report. Here are photos from FSE 18, ICSE Rose, FSE 19. And in fact, we're getting so many roses now, we won't be able to do this slide in future because we won't be able to show all the people going to Roses. So Rose looks like a continuing strong tradition. Rose is a steering committee, Robert Feld, Tom Zimmerman, and myself. Rose has an artifacts committee. And before we go anywhere else, can everyone please just join me in a little thank you to the artifacts committee, who did so much work working with the people who submitted, finding bugs in their install scripts, fixing those install scripts. We had thousands of interactions between anonymous reviewers and submitters to improve the artifacts. And we had artifacts jump up the badge scale because people fixed things and made things better. So I'm very excited, very pleased at all the effort of our people. So thank you so much to them. Now, just some frequently asked questions. Is assigning a badge silly? Why put a little piece of color on a piece of paper? Does it actually matter? Sure, badging is just a little bit of color. It's a bit silly in some ways, but the experience has been it's a crazy strong motivator. Leandrew showed you before the artifacts effect. If you want to have open science and software engineering, you have to create the social conditions that reward that open science. And the badging is one way to do it. Now, will ACM and IEEE implement badging? They're already badging available and functional and lower levels. The issue with the high level badging, replicated and reproduced, is you have to reach back in time into ACM portal, into IEEE Explorer, and change the label of an old paper. Now, the good news is everyone's willing to do that. That's going to happen. The frustrating news is we've been in that stage of it's going to happen soon for about a year. I can report that the COVID stuff has slowed down the pace of administrative review, of software updates. So I can absolutely tell you that in the near future, we will be reaching back in time and assigning new badges to old papers in ACM portal and IEEE Explorer, but it's just not going to happen this month. Can you organize a Rose Festival? Absolutely. Please talk to the steering committee, Robert Feld, Tim Menzies, Tom Zimmerman. Please make sure you're satisfying the list on slide 3. But really, we'd love you to organize a Rose Festival at your next event. Now, Rose is part of a growing interest in open science. If you look at the Open Science Initiative at the MZ Journal, a lot of people are very excited about sharing artifacts and having more reproducibility. If you look at the, this tweet shows the registered reports track, where our artifacts here are typically code artifacts. And with the registered reports, it's much earlier life cycle things, ideas, methods, people saying, this is what I'm planning to do, please check. And Neil Ernst is doing a great job running the registered reports track at MSR and at ICSME. So we're very excited about that. So we're going to go to the lightning talks right now. These will be 2 minutes long. I will be rude to presenters. If they last more than 2 minutes, I'm just shutting them down. there'll be a minute for question time, which is very, very brief. So we really, really encourage you to go to the Slack channel shown at the bottom of the page and to put your questions in before the talks are over. Then we're going to have a 4-minute, then we're going to have a panel where hopefully we can have more discussions amongst all of you. We've got 2 panelists that'll talk for 4 minutes, then a general thing. The QA will be fast. Now, our PC chair, Darkov, has reminded us that some of the artifacts will be briefly recognized in the keynote in about an hour. So please attend the keynote at ICSE where we'll get much more recognition for the artifacts, especially those people with artifact awards. And so the slides have stopped turning and I've lost the screen. Here are our presenters. This is, I think, the running order. I'm just going to ask our first speaker, Rahul, to unmute, introduce themselves, and they have 2 minutes to talk, starting now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rahul, and I'm here to present our artifact for the work near duplicate detection in web app model inference. Next slide, please. So yeah, this is done in collaboration with Andrea Stoke and Ali Mesma. So automated model inference is the process of creating state transition models from web applications. And these models can be then used to generate test cases and things like that. Next slide, please. So state comparison is an important part of model inference, but this process is complicated by the presence of near duplicate states, which look very similar to each other. And they can be potentially infinite in modern web apps that are dynamic. Next slide, please. And when these near duplicates are present in web applications, if the state comparison is too strict that every change is considered important, you end up producing inflated models. And if it is too tolerant, you end up producing incomplete models, both of which are undesirable. So in order to study this problem, we created a manual label dataset from 6,000 random websites and labeled 1,500 of them. Then we also created another dataset over 9 open source web apps to evaluate crawl models for 10 near duplicate detection techniques from 3 different domains. All of these are, of course, available as part of the artifact, and future researchers may evaluate their near duplication techniques using this artifact. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Leandro, you're gonna have to read out the questions.
So no questions in Slack yet, but you've manually labeled quite a lot of data. Could you just mention how this labeling was done?
Yeah, so we created a tool, an HTML like web page based tool that lets us quickly label. And for models, actually there's a lot of repetition in because each state is compared with every other state in the model. So it's possible to transfer some of the labels automatically, and we created a tool to do that. So it let us create the labels very fast for the second data set.
Okay.
I don't understand why the state space doesn't expand infinitely. Like how how does this even work?
Yeah, it is. We have time that is given for each crawl, so 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So for the second data set, for 9 web applications, we have a time limit of 60 minutes and 150 states.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Can our next speaker unmute and talk, please?
Hello, everyone. It's Rifatara Shams from Monash University, Australia, and the team OVIS, that stands for Operationalizing Values in Software. Well, in this study, we have worked on addressing human values in mobile apps with the aim to develop society-oriented values-based apps. To achieve this goal, the first step is to explore the values of the app users. Well, for this purpose, we have used a universal human values theory from social science called the Schwartz values theory that has defined 58 human values, such as freedom, independence, privacy, tradition, and much more. Next slide, please. So we have conducted a case study with 29 Bangladeshi agriculture apps by manually analyzing 1,522 reviews. Next slide, please. Well, the reviews were placed under 3 categories: desired values, present values, and missing values. The terms desired and present have been used when a user expects a value from an app and when a value is already reflected in that app. And we named the values as missing values that are desired by the users but not present in the app. At first, the user reviews were manually classified under some categories like criticism, problem-based, suggestions, expectations, queries, and praise. A review under the category praise can be related to present values, and under other categories is related to desired values. Then we again manually classified all the reviews to relate with particular values. Next slide. Next, please. Well, these are the artifacts we contributed. Here, Y means yes, it is related, and N means no. And we believe our artifacts are well structured, exercisable, and of course, it is open for verification and validation. So
very good. Question time.
So it's over. 2 minutes over. Yes, please.
Could you give some examples of how people could apply your artifact?
Yes, actually it is, as I said, that it is manually classified under 3 categories: desired, present, and missing. For example, it would be clear if I give an example. I got a review that states the app is not for all, it's only for the smart farmers. So it can be related to the value equality and placed under the category desired values. We worked with an abstract topic like values, so we tried to think openly and understand the semantics of the reviews.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Next speaker.
I just asked to shift to the video.
So Leandro is now going to video for this one.
Hello everyone, this is Shayan Zamani. I'm a master's student at the University of Calgary, Canada. The title of our paper is Revisiting Hyperparameter Tuning for Search-Based Test Data Generation, and we are the only paper that earned the replicated badge in Rose Festival ICSE 2020. The paper that we replicated was published in 2013 in Empirical Software Engineering Journal by Arcuri and Fraser, and it raised the question if for search-based test data generation tools like EvoSuite, hyperparameter tuning is needed or we can just use default values. In the baseline paper, they found that out of 20 selective classes that they studied, the coverage of most classes are highly dependent to hyperparameter configurations. They also found that the default setup is as good as the tuned values, so they didn't see any value in tuning. However, our results on a bigger study of 177 Java classes showed that for 80% of the classes, coverage is not sensitive to tuning. So it is a waste of time to put resources on all those 80% classes during tuning. And we just have to focus on the rest of the classes that are tunable. We also showed that on classes that benefit from tuning, the default setup is not particularly good. It is just as good as a random tuning. The continuation of this work is on prioritizing and finding those 20% of classes that were suitable for tuning in search-based testing using their static features, which showed better results than default values. Thanks for listening, and check out our paper for more information. questions.
So any questions for Cheyenne? We have one question for Cheyenne. Anything?
There is a question here. Are there shared characteristics or similarities between the 20 classes in the original study and the set used in the replication?
Can you please just repeat the question?
Yes, so the question is in Slack. It's, are there shared characteristics or dissimilarities between the 20 classes in the original study and the set used in the replication?
Yeah, so the classes that they selected were the ones that have very complex structure, but it wasn't representing the real world classes. So we get the classes from the projects, the whole set of classes from the projects, 3 projects, and that's why we saw this observation.
Very good. So Cheyenne is on Slack. If you have other questions, just jump to him next. Next speaker, please. Next speaker, please.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Chang Wei. This is a joint work with my supervisor, Professor Jinin Xie. The technique we provide is the saddle stack with the microsecond level runtime dynamization. Our prototype is named as Bellow. We have implemented Bellow in the LLVM compiler to a train. Fundamentally, Bellow is an assembly instrumentator. Next, please. The runtime randomization overheads and the different core stack depths are listed in this table. Yeah. In general, the time taken by our runtime randomization is linearly proportional to the depth of the core stack. In principal work, a paper published on NDSS 1916, it takes several seconds to do a round of runtime randomization. But in our work, next piece, yeah, by exploiting the format string vulnerability at line 4, we give a proof of concept attack to show the effectiveness of our protection. Due to the one level of deduction in our solution, the attack surface is limited to the set of all return addresses. We have also add microsecond level runtime randomization to further protect it, to make the attack harder to guess the return ID. So as shown at line 43, we can catch the attack instantly. Next. Yeah, we have also open source of our solution. Yeah, in fact, it's a 3-in-1 approach for protecting return addresses.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Yeah, question time?
No questions from Slack.
Can you explain why you're linear and other people are not? I didn't get that.
Yeah, because they map the whole code sections, so they need to check all the code pointers. That takes time, to maybe seconds time to finish the code pointer checking. But we don't do the code pointer checking. Yeah, that's the
okay.
The difference.
Leandro, any other questions?
No.
So do you think your work has implications for other, internal state space explorations? There are ways to reduce the search of many other static code analyzing methods.
Yeah, the key difference is because we add an additional indirection, so we don't need to remap the code sections. So we don't do the code pointer checking. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello everyone. My name is MD Johirul Islam. I welcome you all to our presentation on the artifacts of our paper, Repairing Deep Neural Networks, Fixed Patterns and Challenges. Next, please. As artifact of the paper, we have contributed a manually labeled dataset consisting of DNN bug fixed patterns from 5 most popular DNN libraries from both Stack Overflow and GitHub. We have also proposed a classification scheme for DNN bug fixed patterns and we have made the dataset publicly available. Next, please. We started with the dataset proposed by Islam et al. At ICSE FSC 19. Out of the bugs they proposed, we were able to collect 320 fixes from Stack Overflow and 347 fixes from GitHub. Next, please. At the first step, a supervised pilot study was conducted to understand the classification scheme needed to label all the bug fix patterns we have collected. This process continued until we have agreement on the classification scheme. And then the second and third authors of the paper were involved in labeling the bug fix patterns, and a moderator was involved in resolving the disagreements between the raters. We computed the agreement using kappa coefficient. Finally, we have a labeled data set of bug fix patterns. Next, please. From this data set, we will be able to understand the distribution of bug fix patterns that DNN have, and it can also enhance further research on devising automatic bug repair tools for DNN models. Next, please. So in summary, we have contributed a data set of DNN bug fix patterns, and we have also identified 15 unique DNN specific bug fix patterns, and we made the data set publicly available. Thank you. If you have any question right now.
2 minutes exactly.
Could you explain how the bugs and fixes are described in the data?
How the bugs and fixes are described in the data?
Yeah, how they're represented.
So from Stack Overflow, the fixes are identified if a developer has asked a question that this program has some bug, and another developer has answered it, and that original poster has accepted the answer that the bug is fixed, we consider it as a fix. And for GitHub, we consider bug fix commits to identify the fixes of the previous bugs. Does that answer your question?
Not entirely, but it's okay. It's okay.
Other questions? Very good. And now, because she did so well, we come back to Rifat.
Okay, so again, officially, hello everyone. I'm Rifat Shams from Monash University and the team OVIS. All right, as I said previously, that we are working on operationalizing human values in software, but particularly in this research, we have investigated to what extent software engineering research is taking human values into account. For this purpose, we have manually classified the abstract of 1,350 papers from 4 top-tier software engineering journals and conferences from 2015 to 2018 to investigate the prevalence of human values in software engineering. And again, we have used Schwartz values theory for this paper as well. Next, please. Well, at first we manually, collected the papers and allocated among the 7 raters, and then the papers were classified based on their relevance to human values. All of the papers were manually analyzed if it is directly related to any of the values and which particular main value categories and individual value items it is related to. And we have, for each paper, we have multiple raters. And in case of any disagreement, we had disagreement resolution as well. Next. We have found that only 16% papers are directly related to human values. And if we don't consider security and privacy, then the ratio becomes only 10%. And helpfulness is the most addressed value in the papers. Next. Among all the journals and conferences we considered, ICSE has the most, 58% papers that addressed human values. Next. Well, these are the artifacts we contributed. We have already provided instructions on how to reuse the artifacts and reproduce the results. So we believe our artifacts would be really helpful and reusable for the researchers of the same interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
We have a question in Slack. I'm curious what efforts you took to make this artifact reusable.
I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding. This is not under the category reusable. My first paper was under the category reusable, and it is under the category available. Maybe a confusion happened there. So it is already in the archival repository, so we can say it is available.
So I'm shocked at the low numbers, or should I not be shocked? You know, like is software engineering morally bankrupt?
No, we are not shocked. In fact, we were expecting that human values. We know there are limited considerations of human values in software engineering. So the result is only 16%. So basically, we are not shocked. We are expecting this.
There is another question. Do we have time for it?
Quickly.
How would you anticipate people using your findings on values in their research?
Can you please ask the question again? I didn't get it.
How would you anticipate people using your findings on values in their research?
Oh, well, so actually we are conducting various projects on operationalizing values in software. That's why we are calling it operationalizing. So we are already looking in the artifacts level if the value is considering there. And at first, we are using some value measurement tool to explore the values of the users. And then we are looking in the practitioners level if it is, in fact, how we can incorporate values, and in the design level. And one of our members is working on design patterns, and another is working on the methodology. He's working on goal modeling.
So we're going to have to pause you there and move on and encourage the speakers, the questioners, to talk to you after. Can we have our next speaker, please?
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Guang Hong from Purdue University. I'm going to present the artifact of our paper. This is a joint work from Purdue University and Rutgers University. Suppose we have a sentence and feed it into an R model. The task of this model is to predict the sentiment of given inputs. For this sentence, it produces neutral sentiment. Obviously, it should be negative. However, it is unclear why the prediction is wrong. We unroll the R model to individual steps. We say each pair of input, including internal and output, a state, and all those states constitute a trace. Here is the output at each step of the example sentence. We can see what the problem is from the state working. It is evident that a misclassification is caused by buggy states within a trace. We hence aim to identify those buggy states. Here is an example. Particularly, we train classifiers to identify divergent steps. The states at word much is the problem. However, there are many dimensions in this state, including input and internal. How do we find the dominating ones? We utilize a pre-trained importance vector to locate the defective dimensions with large values because they are more important to the classification results. To mitigate the negative effect from those dimensions, we add random perturbations to them and regulate embeddings using the output from the two sets of state vectors. As such, we can alleviate the root cause to misclassification. We evaluate our technique trained on 135 models and can improve model accuracy for 5.37% on average. Our artifacts are available on GitHub. Thank you.
Thank you. 1 minute for questions.
We have several questions here. One of the questions is, what are the main problems related to open science replicability of the conducted experiments?
I think because in machine learning models, there are a lot of randomness for the replicability. We think we need to introduce like the random seed setting, and also probably provide the virtual machine kind of thing, so we can reproduce the experiment down in the work.
Another question, which types of bugs can be detected? A buggy behavior in the system is present whenever the outputs of two classifiers are different. Therefore, the definition of a bug depends on the procedure used to construct those machines. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. So in our technique, we use the validation set, which is unseen for the model. So we use that data set to construct the correct ones and misclassified ones, so we can identify which behavior is wrong for the model. So we can use these identified states to do the debugging.
So thank you very much. Well,
thank you.
Now, next speaker, please.
Okay, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I'm Zheng Dong from National University of Singapore. Today I'm going to present our time travel testing Android apps artifact, a automated Android app testing tool. Okay, let's go into how does the time travel testing works. So after the execution is launched by a testing tool, then the execution goes state by state. Then we observe each state, whether it's state interesting. Then we save the states that are deemed interesting. And interesting mean here is actually is a state that has a potential to be trigger new program behavior. For instance, a state that never visited before. And sorry, can you go back? Then when the progress goes slow, then the execution keep looping the third state. Then, okay, yes, thanks. Then when the progress goes slow, then the execution keep, for instance, looping the third state. Then we terminate the current execution and restore the most interesting state previously saved to launch a new execution. In such a way, then the new program behavior can be kept explored. And so we implement our time travel testing idea into Android Monkey, and we call the tool time machine. So to achieve the high efficiency, we identify program state on Android side, and we maintain the program state like saving or restore state on the desktop side. More importantly, we put the whole framework in the Docker container such that we can easily launch many containers for parallel execution. Next, please. Yeah, our time travel framework is publicly available. They can be used to enhance existing technique like random testing tool or search-based testing tool and other testing tool. Then welcome to use it. Thank you.
Question from Slack. How do you decide whether a state is interesting or not? What's the criteria?
We use two criteria. One is actually is code coverage difference and the state coverage. If we found the new state that never visited before, then potentially interesting. And or even you go state A to state B, then there's some new code is covered. That means some new functionality is enabled in that state. Then we think that is potentially is interesting and potentially trigger new program behavior.
Another question here, what is a state, like an activity on the screen or event?
The state here we define using the GUI layout. Like you have a screen, then we using the, like human defined the state. It's a GUI layout. There's a text box and layout and something that widget or the layout. We identify that as a state.
Very good. So now, thank you everyone to our presenters for finishing all their talks on time. We now go to our panel. We have two panelists. Our first, Jonathan Bell and Aisha Benet and Tamara Abdu. Jonathan, you wanted to share the screen and show your video, or?
Sure, thank you. Let me just get that set up.
4 minutes, sir. Tick, tick.
It's fine. Count now, count now, count now. All right, everyone sees it?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. So thank you very much, Tim and Leandro, for inviting me to this fantastic workshop. So my name is Jonathan Bell. I'm an assistant professor at Northeastern University, and I'm pretty passionate about the artifact evaluation process and open science overall, and so really happy to talk to everyone here today about this. Brief history of my relationship with artifact evaluation, set a little bit of context. I have a maybe interesting perspective on artifacts because I joined the research community just as artifacts were starting up. So I never really had this time period of seeing all these papers without artifacts. Instead, it was just like, it's papers and artifacts. It kind of makes sense. That's kind of the way that I have seen things. I realized that not everyone sees that way, which is a great reason to have a workshop like this. I've been the author of artifacts at UPSLA, FSC, ECOOP, ISTA, and ICSE, and I've served on artifact evaluation committees for UPSLA, ISTA, and ICSME. And most recently this past year, I was the co-chair of artifact evaluation at PLDI. I think that our community has created some great processes for submitting and reviewing artifacts. And my interests now are in maybe taking a little bit of time to make sure that we recognize the best practices being developed at each conference, embrace them, standardize them, make things clear to authors. And this is kind of based on some maybe personal pain that I felt as an author submitting artifacts in the past, like years ago, where there's this maybe fundamental lack of clarity for some authors, at least, in terms of what constitutes an acceptable artifact. I've reproduced here ACM's guidelines for the reusable artifact badge, and note that the definition specifically refers to community norms and standards. Like a reusable artifact is one that exceeds the norms and standards for that type of artifact in the community. So if I'm a newcomer to this community or I've never submitted an artifact before, what the heck does that mean, right? Like, how do I package things? What do I put in it? Does this thing take me and my student, 4 weeks of effort to put together this artifact? Or is this something that I can use the scripts and stuff that I've already got, just upload them somewhere? What is it? So while it's ultimately the author's choice to choose to submit an artifact or not, my goal is hopefully to make this process as transparent and seamless as possible, and ultimately for artifact submission to become the norm. So, rather than seeing maybe 60 out of 100 papers having artifacts being submitted, let's see, 98 out of 100 papers with artifacts being submitted, with 98 out of 100 of those artifacts, all being accepted. I've had a lot of conversations with different authors about why they may choose not to submit artifacts. So again, like, this is maybe not the viewpoint of many who are at this workshop, because if you're here, you're submitting artifacts, right? So why would you not submit an artifact? And frequently something that I've heard is that authors perceive that the criteria for acceptance is higher than it actually is. So it discourages them from submitting. Why should I put all this effort in it just for the badge? And the answer is, well, hopefully it's not that much additional effort over the fact that you've already, done some science and have some artifacts of that science. So I'd like to clarify that process to authors. My hope is to make clear what maybe there could be like a zero overhead process to simply get an available badge. I made my artifact, I posted it online, I made a DOI, I made sure that it will be permanently available. Great. And then also make clear what a maybe lightweight process is to achieve a functional reusable badge. What's next for me? So I just finished co-chairing the PLDI 2020 Artifact Evaluation Committee. I had lots of thoughts about how artifact processes could or should be run. And now I have a lot more experience about doing it from having run this large process. At PLDI, we got almost all papers to submit artifacts. I think that it was maybe 60 out of 70 papers submitted artifacts. And of those 60 submitted artifacts, 58 were accepted. The only 2 that were not accepted were ones basically where the authors were like, we don't have time for this. So thank you very much, Tim. Look forward to continuing this discussion.
Great. So is our other panelist here?
I don't think so. Aisha or Tamer, are you here?
Well, then let me be the other panelist for 60 seconds. Then we'll go to community questions. So firstly, I want to pretend to be someone who disagrees with Jonathan vehemently. And then I want to offer experience suggesting why those disagreements don't work. So you can't do artifacts for all areas of software engineering. There are qualitative fields that do not produce automated code things. And so this obsession with artifacts is actually detrimental to exploratory research. Okay? Now, that's just not true. We've run an artifacts track for the requirements engineering conference. And half the artifacts we generated in that meeting were not code related. For qualitative research, there is research methods. There are checklists, there are questions, there are norms. And by putting that information up as artifacts, that helps speed that kind of work along. If you're doing Mechanical Turk work with lots and lots of people, you need gold questions, questions you know the answer for, and if you find that your Turkers aren't giving you those right answers, you cut their information out from the sample. This is standard practice when you're doing cloud stuff. So there is artifacts for code, for quantitative work. There's artifacts for qualitative. Jonathan's statement is that all papers should produce artifacts. I totally endorse, not just for code, but for other things. So I hope I've completely disagreed and agreed with my distinguished colleague, Jonathan. And now Leandro will chair the panel.
All right, so I think we don't have Aisha or Tamer here, so we are going to carry on with this panel with John, basically. So John, I completely agree with you that it would be great to have some more specific guidelines there on the artifacts. So how do you think that we could best engage the community so that the community as a whole can contribute towards these guidelines?
Great question. So what I've tried so far is talking to lots of people at conferences, which I was doing a lot last year. It's a little bit harder this year, you know, not being able to walk around the coffee session. I have been gathering feedback online. We have a repository on GitHub where we started to put together some sort of guidelines that ended up kind of stalling a little bit over the past few months with various other stuff going on. But hopefully over the next few weeks, we'll put together some draft guidelines. Maybe the easiest way at this point is if anyone else would like to contribute immediately to the first drafting of that document, let me know now. Otherwise, you know, we'll share something for community feedback and markup over the next few weeks.
Yeah, so anyone who would like to contribute could potentially leave a message there in Slack so that we can basically include these people in the discussion.
That sounds great.
Yeah, it would be great if we could hear from people in the audience here what sort of things they would like to see in these guidelines exactly. So does anyone have any input on that? You could type in Slack, or if you can't access Slack, you could type here on the chat.
Just also to set this frame a little bit more, I'm talking about guidelines for authors, guidelines for reviewers, and guidelines for chairs also.
So we have a comment here. What do you think, everyone here involved in ROSE, what do you think about creating a continuous journal style AE that is independent of specific conference or journals? More here, including a link to okay, so they put a link there. But what do you think about creating a continuous journal style AE that is independent of specific conference or journals?
So it sounds very attractive for some reasons. In particular, it allows for maybe a greater back and forth between reviewers and the authors, right? Because you don't have this, like, you have to finish it by the camera ready deadline for the paper, and if not, you don't get a badge, and that's the end of it. But I'm not sure how that would really work in terms of assigning badges, the extent that people want badges, because publishers have their own rules, and I don't know what those rules are. Sounds great.
Mm-hmm. We have another comment here from the audience regarding to the things that Tim was commenting on before. I believe all research could be replicated, otherwise it is not research. It is just a matter of automated replication or manual qualitative. Research replication is done mainly manually. Code related can be fully automated. We just need better and transparent guidelines for evaluation and replication. So that's kind of like complementary also to what John was saying about the guidelines in terms of what exactly is necessary for this artifact to be awarded, right?
Yeah, maybe just to follow up on that also is that I'm not sure that I'm ready to make the statement that all papers must have or could have artifacts. I think that we have been thinking for a while about some specific kinds of artifacts. Like, we maybe understand pretty well how to make an artifact for your tool, but creating artifacts for other kinds of papers might be difficult or impossible. And that's something that I think we need to keep working out over the next few years. But let's see now, like, what we understand well, take those best practices, normalize them, and then like try to keep pushing this further.
We have a comment from a person here saying that reviewers tend to be overcritical with all artifacts in my experience. Do you feel that?
I want to take that one. We're reviewing artifacts a lot of the time from papers that have gone through a separate peer review process. The reviewing process for artifacts should be different to the reviewing process for technical papers at ICSE. We had a very good experience on all the artifact tracks I've run, where anonymous reviewers and the authors work together to debug the install scripts, to improve the documentation, to make the artifacts better. And it was joyous to see a community of people leaning in to help each other. Jonathan reports an over 90% acceptance rate for his artifacts track. We are the same. Artifacts come from other stuff that's been critically reviewed. Reviews for artifacts should be different, gentler, more open.
Yeah, and we experienced that in the ICSE 2020 artifacts track as well, right? Because we could see there very nice interaction between the reviewers and the authors of the artifacts, so that the artifact will be reaching the acceptance state.
Not to minimize Ben's comment about artifact reviewers being really critical in cases. Like, I've certainly seen that too as an author, and I've certainly seen that too as a chair. And I think that that's due to a lack of like general shared understanding of what the norms are in terms of what is sufficient and what is our job. I think that that's something that we solve with education. Something that we did with PLDI's Artifact Evaluation Committee this year, which I guess is actually kind of normal at the SIG plan committees, is we had a conference call at the start of the process. Many of the artifact reviewers, this might be like the first time that you're involved in a peer review process, and maybe, you know, first or second time doing an artifact evaluation. So we found that doing this kind of conference call, setting the tone, going through, you know, taking questions live is maybe helpful also for this.
Okay. So we have some more comments here in terms of community-run journals, and Krista said that she's helping to run one. Krista, would you like to comment more on that? Maybe you can unmute yourself. Let's see if that works.
Hello. Hi. Yes. So you know, a few years ago, I have been thinking about these issues for a long time, about publications, conferences, all that stuff. So I started experimenting with everything, really. So another thing that we experimented a few years ago was to create a journal of our own. And this is the programming journal, the Art, Science, and Engineering of Programming. And it's a journal that is does not belong to the any major publishers. It's it belongs to a non-profit organization, AOSA. Basically, it's us who run that thing, and it's interesting. I mean, there's some hoops that you kind of need to learn about how to become a publisher. There's some numbers that you need to get from the Library of Congress, some you know, requirements that you need to adhere to, and but it's not a big deal. You can actually, it's very doable, and the journal is on and it's running. It takes submissions every 4 months, so we accept we publish 3 times a year or more. We've been hesitating to increase the number because there is a certain overhead of actually the publication itself. So, you know, getting the right metadata to the right places is a big of an overhead, and we don't have that automated. But if we know with some automation, that could be made much easier, and we could potentially increase the number of issues. But so it's just to tell you that, you know, we are not completely victims of the big publishers. We can do stuff ourselves. And you know, I would encourage, the journal is run as an overlay to archive. So the long-term storage is archive. And it, I mean, it's going great. Now it's already indexed by one of the major indexers, Scopus. You know, everything is possible. Basically, that's my message. And if people are motivated enough to create something that they want to set the rules, just do it.
Yeah, I think that is really interesting. I actually always wondered why a journal like this didn't exist, right? And I think one of the main reasons is people usually rely on the publishers to basically publish the proceedings, or, well, in terms of conference, but in terms of journals, to publish the articles themselves. But with tools like arXiv and so on, it's actually possible to, publish the articles in these places as well. So we have a comment here that seems to have attracted some likes. In my experience, there is a trade-off in packaging code artifacts. For the review process, it seems to be most convenient to put everything into a virtual machine or Docker container. And yes, typically everything works there smoothly. However, for reusing a tool in your own project, this is a mess. It is very hard to get the code out of the container and to get it working in your own environment. For code, it would be much more pleasant to have a code release on Maven, Nugget, etc. It seems that there are no incentives in place right now to encourage proper releases of research code. So does anyone have a comment on that?
Can I take that one? Or should I let someone else jump in? Okay, so there are two issues here. One is, how do we make sure that your artifact is going to be really permanently archived and usable in the future? For that, we need something that will be an archival medium. We need packaging that will include everything that you need. Here's an example of why deploying on something on Maven can be insufficient. Until about 2012, one of the largest repositories of Maven dependencies was called Codehouse. In 2012, Codehouse stopped doing that. All of the dependencies went away. Therefore, if you had a project and you were like, yep, you can just build it, it downloads all the dependencies, all of a sudden it would stop doing that. Or you need a new version of Java or an old version of Java. So doing the container, really important. Putting all of that somewhere where it's permanently archived, not GitHub, not Maven Central, but something like Zenodo, Figshare, someone who's going to say, look, our entire mission is to make sure that this will always be available. Great. At the same time, yeah, that's a huge pain in the ass if you're also like, wow, I just want to compile the code. So do both. When I release my artifacts, generally we do both.
So my comment here is that I see two populations of people. I see people who say artifacts is too hard, too hard, too hard, too hard. And then I see another group of people delivering lots of artifacts. Jonathan, what was your number from the PL community of people generating artifacts?
Let me pull it up, sorry.
Well, it was over 90%, right? 90% of the papers.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
And at ICSE, 111 submitted papers and 64 accepted artifacts. So, here's the thing about artifacts. It's not hard. I've pasted into the Slack channel a very nice paper called Good Enough Practices in Scientific Computing. And it's a nice, sane view. Yes, it'd be great to have artifacts that, are written somewhere and get run everywhere. But dude, we're software engineers. We lean in. My grad students typically spend 2 to 4 weeks commissioning artifacts taken from elsewhere. So I have an algorithm for doing artifacts. It's called Grad Students. And that's just how it goes, guys. That's how it goes. We don't have perfect sharing mechanisms, but we have human institutions that make that sharing possible, practical, affordable, and timely within our current structures. We're seeing a growing number of artifacts at PL, at ICSE, at FSE. The reward structures are there. I had a paper rejected from a certain conference. One reason, because one reviewer was dark, because I had typos in the README of my artifact. And the call for papers for that journal did not require artifacts submitted. The reviewer added the criteria that the artifact had to be working, and I got the paper rejected. And that's the sort of community pressure we're seeing growing, and that's what I want to offer you all today. And that's it. That's the end of our panel. Any final comments, Leandro?
There are a few here, but I think we really ran out of time right now. One interesting one, if I may, it's a comment here. The elephant in the room for me is always, when do we couple artifact submission and paper acceptance? That's an interesting question from Ben Herman.
I think that we need to keep doing what everyone in this workshop is doing, which is submitting artifacts and working to improve the process and working to get more people to submit artifacts. And eventually there's going to be a point where so many papers are submitting artifacts that the people who will complain against it will be so few, right?
Okay, good. Yeah, so I think we ran out of time now, but it's been a pleasure to discuss with all of you. Thank you very much for the presentations and for the panel. I think this has been really useful for everyone. So Tim, would you like to say some final words?
Some final words.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone. So we are closed now.
Thank you, everyone. If you want to keep chatting about this more, I'll be on Clouder.
Yeah,
Maybe some people have seen it.
Does anyone know how to say